The attic of my house in Cheyenne is the kind of place where time goes to wait. It is cold in the corners even in summer. It smells of dust and old cardboard and the dry wood of the rafters, and it is lit by a single bare bulb on a pull chain that swings when you yank it, throwing shadows around the boxes. I had climbed up there on an ordinary Saturday to find the Christmas decorations, nothing more. And instead, behind a stack of boxes I had not touched in years, I found a shoebox I did not remember keeping. Soft at the corners, the cardboard gone furry with age, and on the lid, in my own handwriting from some decade I could not place, one word: Carol. Inside that box were 38 greeting cards, one for every birthday of my adult life, and the Christmases too, all from the same person, my stepmother, the woman I had spent nearly 40 years keeping at a careful, polite distance. I had saved every single one and, I'm ashamed to say, truly read almost none of them. That cold afternoon on the attic floor, I finally read all 38, in order, and by the third one, my hands were shaking. And by the last one, I understood that I had spent my whole life misunderstanding who my family actually was. My name is Shannon Reeves. I am 48 years old, and I sell real estate in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I spend my days helping people find the place they will call home, which is a strange profession to have while learning, at 48, that I had failed to recognize a home that had been offered to me for 38 years. I want to tell you what was in those cards, but first you have to understand the distance I kept and why. I have thought a lot this past year about how a decision you make as a frightened child can quietly run your life for decades without you ever revisiting it. At 10 and 12, choosing my mother's side and freezing out the woman who took her place felt like loyalty, like the only honorable thing a daughter could do. And maybe at 12 it was. But the problem with the decisions we make as children is that they do not announce their own expiration. They just keep running, silently, in the background, long after the child who made them has become an adult who would never choose them fresh. I never once, in 38 years, sat down as a grown woman and actually decided to keep Carol at a distance. I just never undecided it. The 12-year-old's verdict stayed in force by sheer inertia, governing the conduct of a 48-year-old who had long since forgotten she was even enforcing it. That, I think, is how a lot of our coldest, longest estrangements work. Nobody renews them. Nobody has to. They just run until something forces a reckoning, and most of the time, nothing ever does. My parents divorced when I was 10. It was not a friendly divorce, and I was a child. And like a lot of children, I dealt with it by choosing a side. And the side I chose was my mother's. So when my father remarried a couple of years later, and a woman named Carol came into the picture, I had already decided, with the fierce loyalty of a wounded kid, exactly how I would treat her. Politely and from a distance, forever. And I kept that vow with a discipline I am not proud of. Carol was never anything but kind to me. She was not the wicked stepmother of the stories. There was no cruelty to push against, which in a way made my coldness harder to justify and easier to maintain, because she never gave me a reason to thaw. I just decided she was not my mother, which was true, and let that mean she was nothing to me, which was a choice. I was civil at holidays. I called my father, not her. When my own mother was alive, I funneled all my daughterly warmth there, and after my mother passed, when I was 30, I simply had less warmth to give anyone, and Carol still did not get any of it. Through all of it, for 38 years, Carol never pushed, never demanded, never once said you've shut me out, and it hurts. She just sent a card, every birthday, every Christmas, with a few lines in her small, neat handwriting, and I would glance at them and feel a flicker of something I quickly suppressed, and put them in a box, and send back, at most, a signed card with nothing written in it. That was the exchange, year after year after year. Her words, my silence. And I want to be fair to my younger self, because she was not a monster, only a wounded, and then a busy person, which is most of us. I was not sitting at my desk each year cackling as I sent Carol a blank card. I barely thought about it at all. That is almost worse, honestly. Active cruelty at least takes effort and attention. What I gave Carol was the casual, distracted neglect of someone who has filed a person under not important and stopped really seeing them. I was building a career, raising children, losing my mother, living a full and demanding life, and Carol existed somewhere at the very edge of it. A name on a return address, easy to acknowledge with the least possible effort and then forget. I did not hate her. Hating her would have required me to think about her. I just never gave her enough of my attention to graduate from obligation into person. And the terrible irony, which I see now, is that the whole time I was barely thinking of her, she was clearly thinking, carefully and lovingly, of me, tracking my life, remembering my children's names, choosing her words. The attention I would not spare her, she lavished on me for 38 years, into what must have felt like a void. What made me sit down and actually read them, that day in the attic, I cannot fully explain. Maybe it was finding them all together, the sheer weight of 38 of them in one box. Maybe it was that my father had been gone 8 years by then, and Carol was very old now, and something in me knew the account was coming due. I think, too, that I was at an age where I had started to feel the shape of my own mortality, and with it, a new sensitivity to loose threads. 48 is the age when your parents' generation begins, in earnest, to leave the world. When the obituaries start, including people you knew, when you understand in your body, and not just your head, that the people still around will not always be. Something in me, climbing into that attic, was perhaps already half aware that Carol was a door closing, that the window in which anything could still be done about her was narrowing toward zero. I do not believe in much that is mystical, but I do believe that sometimes a part of us knows what the rest of us is not ready to face and steers us toward the right box on the right Saturday while there is still just barely time. I went up for Christmas decorations. I do not entirely believe that is why I went up. So I sat down on the cold floor under that swinging bulb, and I opened them in order, oldest first, and I read them the way I never had when they arrived one at a time with a whole year between them to forget. And reading them all at once, in sequence, did something that reading them one a year could never do. It revealed the pattern. It showed me, in 38 installments, the shape of what Carol had actually been doing my entire adult life. There is a reason reading them one a year had hidden the truth from me, and reading them all at once revealed it. And I think it is worth naming, because it is how a lot of slow love stays invisible. When a kindness arrives in tiny, widely spaced installments, one card every 12 months, each installment is small enough to dismiss. A single card is nothing. You can wave it off as a formality, a habit, the least someone can do. The love is real, but it is delivered in doses so small and so far apart that no single dose ever forces you to reckon with it. It is only when you stack all the doses together, 38 of them, in a shoebox, in your lap, that the cumulative weight becomes undeniable, that you see it was never 38 small nothings, but one enormous, sustained, decades-long act of devotion, broken into payments small enough to ignore. Carol's love was hidden from me, not despite its consistency, but because of it. She gave it so steadily, in such modest amounts, that I never once got the jolt that might have woken me up. The attic, finally, gave me the jolt. All 38 years arriving at once, because each card on its own had seemed like a small, dutiful thing. But all of them together were not small at all. They were a record of devotion. She had written, every year, about my life. My real life, the details. She knew I had gotten the job in real estate. She congratulated me the year I sold my first house, a thing I did not even remember telling my father. She knew the names of my children. She wrote, the year my mother died, the most tender note imaginable. I know I am not her, and would never try to be, but if you ever need a mother's ear, mine is here, no strings, for as long as you want it. That one, the year my mother died, is the one I cannot forgive myself for missing. I was 30 and shattered, and in the worst grief of my life, and a woman reached across all my years of coldness to offer me, with perfect tact, exactly the thing I had just lost. A mother's ear, no strings. And not only did I not take it, I did not even read it. It went into the box with the others, glanced at and filed, while I went on grieving alone and telling myself I had no mother left in the world. I did have one. She was right there, in an envelope, offering. I just could not see an offer of mothering from someone I had decided was not my mother. The category I had locked her into was so rigid that it blinded me even in the moment I most needed what she was holding out. How much less alone might those years have been if I had been able to read one card with an open heart? That is the cost of the borders we refuse to redraw. Not just the relationship we lose, but the comfort we refuse, sometimes at the exact moment we are dying for it. I had not even remembered receiving that. I had been 30 and grieving, and I had filed a stranger's grace away in a box unread. Year after year, the cards tracked my whole existence from a respectful distance, full of a specific, attentive, entirely unrewarded love. And the detail that broke me, sitting on that floor, was the dates. Because my father died 8 years ago, and the cards did not stop. Carol had no obligation to me anymore. The man who connected us was gone. There was no family tie left, nothing requiring her to remember a stepdaughter who had never given her anything. And she kept sending them. 8 more birthdays, 8 more Christmases, 8 more years of a widow in her 80s, sitting down to write a few warm lines to a woman who had shut her out for decades, asking for nothing, expecting nothing, getting nothing. Because she had, at some point I was too cold to notice, simply decided to love me. And she was not going to stop just because I never loved her back. There was one card, from about 5 years ago, that I had to read 3 times. In it, Carol wrote, almost in passing, "I know you're busy, and I know I'm not high on your list, and that's all right. I didn't write to climb your list. I wrote so you'd know there was always one more person in your corner than you thought. That's all. Happy birthday, sweetheart." I sat with that on the attic floor and felt the full weight of how thoroughly she had understood the whole situation the entire time. I had assumed, in the lazy way you assume things about people you keep at a distance, that maybe she didn't notice my coldness, or didn't mind it, or sent the cards on some kind of autopilot. That card proved she had seen all of it, clearly, for what it was. She knew exactly where she stood with me, knew she was not high on my list, knew the cards went mostly unread, and she had made an open-eyed choice to keep loving me anyway, on purpose, with no illusions. It is one thing to love someone who does not love you back, because you don't realize they don't. It is another thing entirely to know, with total clarity, that your love is not being returned, and to deliberately keep giving it for 38 years. The second one is not naivety. It is a kind of greatness. I sat on that attic floor for a long time, with 38 cards spread around me, and I cried in a way I had not cried in years. Because I finally understood what I had done, and what she had done, and the gap between the two. I had spent 38 years protecting a decision I made when I was 12 years old, that Carol was not my mother, and therefore was not my family. And I had let that childhood logic run my whole adult life, defending a border that did not need defending against a woman who was never trying to invade, only to be let in. And on the other side of that border, the whole time, Carol had been doing the truest thing a person can do. She had been choosing me. Not because biology required it. It didn't. Not because anyone would have blamed her for drifting away after Dad died. No one would have. She chose me, freely, repeatedly, for 38 years, with no reward and no acknowledgement and no hope of either, which is very nearly the definition of the purest love there is. I had a mother who loved me out of the deep pull of having carried me, and I had Carol, who loved me out of nothing but choice, which in some ways is the more astonishing thing, and I had spent my life treating the chosen love as worth less than the obligated kind, when if anything it was worth more. My mother, my birth mother, whom I loved fiercely and grieved hard, had loved me, but she had also, like all of us, been bound to me by biology and history, by the simple fact that I was hers, and there was never any question of it. That love was a given, in the most literal sense. It was given to me at birth, unearned, automatic. Carol's love was the opposite. Nothing about it was automatic. She walked into the life of a hostile 12-year-old who had decided to hate her on principle, and she had every easy off-ramp a person could want. The divorce from obligation that comes when the marriage ends, the total release that comes when the husband dies. At every exit, for 38 years, she could have stopped, and no one on earth would have faulted her, and she would simply have faded out of my life the way stepmothers usually do. She took none of the exits. She chose the on-ramp every single year. And it occurs to me now that we have the value backwards in our culture. We sentimentalize blood love as the highest kind, but blood love is the kind you cannot help. Chosen love, given freely to someone who offers nothing and could be abandoned at no cost. That is the love that actually proves something, because it is the only kind that is entirely, every day, a decision. I had been so busy insisting she was not my real mother that I never noticed she had become, by every measure that counts, real family. The realest kind, the kind that stays when it does not have to. The shame of it sat very heavy on me, and I will not pretend it didn't. 38 years of a person reaching out, and 38 years of me offering back the bare minimum that politeness required. But underneath the shame was something more urgent, and it got me up off that floor. Carol was still alive. She was 82 years old, living in an assisted living facility on the other side of town, 15 minutes from the house where I sat surrounded by her unanswered cards. 8 years a widow, very old now, and as far as I knew still, somewhere, planning to send me a card this coming birthday, because she had never once stopped. I did not have to let this be a story about a debt I realized too late. She was 15 minutes away, the door I had kept shut for 38 years. I could still open it. She was still behind it. I just had to go. I did not wait. I put the cards back in the box, and I drove across Cheyenne with that box on the passenger seat, and I walked into that assisted living facility on a Saturday afternoon unannounced, and I asked for Carol. The drive across Cheyenne took 15 minutes, and I have made it 100 times since for the most ordinary errands, never once thinking of it as a distance worth crossing. 15 minutes. That was the entire width of the gulf I had let stand for 38 years. Not an ocean, not a continent, just 15 minutes of city streets I drove all the time anyway. I think that is what struck me hardest in the car, the box of cards on the seat beside me. How small the actual distance had always been, how easily and at any moment it could have been crossed, how the only thing that had ever made it uncrossable was a decision in my own head. The miles had never been the problem. The miles were nothing. She was in a chair by a window, smaller than I remembered, her hands a little unsteady, and when she saw me, her face did a thing I will never forget. Surprise, then a flash of worry that something must be wrong, because why else would Shannon come? And then, when she saw the shoebox in my arms, a dawning understanding. I sat down next to her, and I put the box in her lap, and I could barely get the words out. I said, "Carol, I found all of them. I read all of them, all 38. And I said the thing I had owed her for most of my life. I said, I'm so sorry it took me this long. You were my family the whole time, and I was too stubborn to see it. And you never gave up on me anyway. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up." And this woman, who had every right to be bitter, who had been handed nothing but cool politeness for 38 years, just took my hand in her unsteady ones and said, "Oh, honey, I never needed you to write back. I just needed you to have them, for whenever you were ready." She had been playing a 38-year-long game, and the prize was this exact moment, and she had never been sure it would come, and she had kept playing anyway. We sat by that window for a long time, going through the box together, and she remembered every card, not the exact words, but the years. What had been happening in my life when she wrote each one? Things I had told my father that had filtered back to her. She narrated my own life to me from the outside, the version she had assembled from scraps and held onto with both hands. And it was the strangest experience to discover that someone had been keeping such a careful, loving archive of a person who would not even look at her. At one point, She apologized to me. She apologized, this woman, for, as she put it, maybe sending too many over the years. I never wanted to crowd you. I had to put my head down on her lap like a child at that. She had spent 38 years worried that her one card a year might be too much, might be crowding the stepdaughter who gave her nothing, when in truth, it had been a miracle of restraint and patience. A love so careful, it spent 4 decades knocking softly so as not to disturb the very person it was knocking for. That was a year and a half ago. I see Carol every week now. I have, at 48, gained a mother at the very end of her life, and it is one of the strange late gifts I never saw coming. There is a particular ache to the timing that I have had to make my peace with. I did not get a mother for my childhood, or my young adulthood, or my grieving 30s, or my busy 40s, all the seasons when a person most needs one. I got her at 82, with her health failing and the calendar short, for what everyone involved understands will be a handful of years at most. It would be easy to be bitter about that, to mourn the 38 years we could have had. And some days I do mourn them. But mostly, I have decided to be astonished by what I got, rather than resentful about what I missed. Because the alternative, the version where I never climbed into that attic, or climbed up and left the box unopened, was no mother at all, and a phone call one day informing me that Carol had died, and a lifetime to understand too late what I had thrown away. Measured against that version, a few good years at the end is not a consolation prize. It is a reprieve. It is very nearly a miracle. I will take the late, short, imperfect gift over the clean, permanent loss every single time. We are making up for as much lost time as 83-year-old health will allow, which is not enough, which is never enough, but is so much more than nothing. My kids know their grandmother now, because that is what she is. I say it plainly now, their grandmother. And I did one thing that I think matters. This past birthday, for the first time in my life, I sent Carol a card, and I did not leave it blank. I filled the whole inside, both panels, my handwriting getting smaller to fit it all in, 38 years of things I should have written finally going down on paper. She told me she sleeps with it on her nightstand. There is a symmetry in that which I find almost unbearably moving. For 38 years, she sent the cards, and I put them in a box. Now I have sent one card, and she keeps it where she can reach it in the night. One card after 38 of hers. It is such a lopsided ledger, and yet she received my single late card with more open joy than I had shown for her 38 combined. That is the thing about people who love the way Carol loves. They are not keeping score. They were never keeping score. And so the one card you finally send lands not as a paltry repayment of an enormous debt, but as a pure and complete gift in its own right, received with the whole heart, no arithmetic attached. I had spent decades dreading, somewhere underneath, that letting Carol in would mean facing a mountain of guilt and obligation. It did not. It just meant being loved, and finally loving back, and discovering that with people like her, there is no mountain at all. There is only the open door, and her still behind it, glad. The cards are still in their shoebox, but the box lives in my living room now, not the attic. And sometimes I take them out and read them, and they no longer make me ashamed. They make me grateful. They are the record of the most patient love anyone ever showed me, and I got to thank her for it while she could still squeeze my hand. My own children have noticed the change, and that may be the part that matters most for the long run. They watched their mother gain a grandmother overnight, watched me drive across town every week, watched me learn, late and clumsily, how to let someone love me who isn't obligated to. I hope it teaches them something I learned too slowly, that you do not get to choose all of your family, but you do get to choose how much of the family that shows up for you you are willing to actually receive. I nearly taught them the opposite by accident, through 38 years of example. I am grateful I got the chance to teach them this instead, with Carol right there at the table, proof in the flesh that the door can still open, that it is never quite as late as you fear, that love left waiting on a doorstep for decades will, astonishingly, still be there when you finally open up. I want to leave you with the 2 things this taught me. The first is about what family actually is and how badly we sometimes define it. I spent my life believing family was the people who were obligated to me, the ones tied by blood, by the deep pull of having raised me. And that is real and precious. But Carol taught me that there is another kind, and it may be the higher kind. The people who are not obligated to you at all, who have every reason to drift away, and who choose you anyway again and again, asking for nothing. We are taught to value the bonds we are born into, but the bonds someone freely chooses and keeps choosing with no reward, those deserve at least as much honor, and I gave mine almost none for 38 years. Look at the people in your life who keep showing up without being required to. That showing up is not nothing. It may be the truest family you have. The second thing is simpler and more urgent. If someone has been quietly loving you from a distance, you keep. A step-parent, an in-law, an estranged relative, anyone who keeps reaching when you keep not reaching back. Do not wait until you find a box of evidence in an attic to recognize it. The reaching is the love. You are probably receiving it right now from someone you have filed under obligation or not really my family, and you have the power to open that door any day you choose. I got lucky. Mine was still alive, 15 minutes away, still waiting, after 38 years. Most doors do not stay openable that long, so if there is a Carol in your life, someone choosing you over and over while you offer back the bare minimum, go. Open the door. Some people choose to love you for decades and never once ask to be let in, and the kindest, most overdue thing you will ever do is finally let them. If this story landed for you, drop the word cards in the comments below. I read them. It tells me which stories are worth telling next. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. First, rethink what family actually is. Most of us define it as the people obligated to us, the ones tied by blood, by the deep pull of having raised us, and that bond is real and precious. But there is another kind that may be higher. The people who are not obligated to you at all, who have every reason to drift away and choose you anyway, again and again, asking for nothing back. We are taught to honor the bonds we are born into, the bonds someone freely chooses and keeps choosing with no reward, deserve at least as much honor. Look hard at whoever keeps showing up for you without being required to. That showing up is not nothing. It may be the truest family you have. Second, if someone is loving you from a distance you keep, recognize it now, not from a box in an attic. The reaching is the love. And you are probably receiving it this very moment from someone you have filed under obligation or not really mine. A step-parent, an in-law, an estranged relative who keeps reaching while you keep not reaching back. You can open that door any day you decide to. I got lucky. Mine was still alive, 15 minutes away, still waiting after 38 years, and most doors do not stay openable that long. If there is a Carol in your life, choosing you over and over, while you offer back the bare minimum, go to them. Some people choose to love you for decades and never ask to be let in. Open the door before it's too late. Some people choose to love you for decades and never ask to be let in. Open the door before it's too late. I'll see you next time.